Today, you're going to be learning about collinearity, betweenness of points, and different assumptions you can and cannot make from a diagram. So let's start with collinear. Collinear are points lying on the same line. So an example of this would look like there you have 3 points. You can draw a straight line through. Therefore, they are collinear. Non-collinear, on the other hand, are points not lying on the same line. So here would be an example of 3 non-collinear points because there is no way that we could draw a straight line through those 3 points. Now, betweenness of points kind of goes along with collinearity. Betweenness of points, a point is considered between 2 points if they are all collinear points. So if you can draw a straight line through those 3 points, then you can consider that point to be between those 2 points. So let's kind of go through an example of betweenness of points. So here would be an example. See, I'm going to call these point A, B, C. Point B would be considered between points A and C because we could draw a straight line through those 3 points. Now let's look at an example where it would not be considered betweenness of points. So if we look at these 3 points, point Q would not be between points P and R because point Q is not collinear with points P and R. Okay, continuing on. Here are some assumptions that you can make from a diagram. You can assume straight lines and straight angles from looking at a diagram. You can assume that points are collinear. Therefore, you can also assume betweenness of points. And you can also assume relative positions of points. So you could assume that point A is to the left of point B and point C. Some things you cannot assume. Right angles. That's one of the biggest mistakes I see on quizzes and tests are that students assume right angles just by looking at a diagram. You can also not assume that 2 segments are congruent, even if they look to be congruent. Same thing goes for angles. If 2 angles look like they are congruent, you cannot assume it unless it is given. Therefore, you can also not assume relative sizes of segments and angles. So that kind of goes along with assuming congruency. You can't assume that this segment looks to be about this size or this angle looks to be about this degree measure. You can never assume those things. So do not make those mistakes. And a lot of times in geometry, diagrams are not drawn to scale. So it's really important that you never make those assumptions and that you use the givens to help you. So the last thing we're going to talk about is the triangle inequality theorem. This theorem states that in a triangle, the sum of any 2 sides must always be greater than the length of the third side. If this is not the case, then the shape is not considered a triangle. It must always be greater. It cannot be equal to, it cannot be less than. It has to be greater.